This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reif Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Who are these two guys? Who are they? We're back.
We only missed a week.
Is that all it was?
Four shows that we would have had during the regular season.
It felt longer.
Yeah, it did feel
longer. I mean, I didn't
I'm
get
back
any more
in
hair.
Tampa anyway.
Yeah, you are.
You have the same amount of hair as you had
I have the
last
same
week,
amount of
I
hair.
think.
Nothing's changed from that perspective. But we're here to really just talk hockey with our audience. We do have Braydon Coburn. He's going to be coming up in just a second, and we can talk about the playoffs. We can talk about exit interviews again, getting into the Lightning, heading into next year. That's all fair
We didn't
game.
get to as many questions last Wednesday, which was our last show. I don't know if we have any more questions, but we're happy to answer them. There's really been no news on the Lightning front in the last week, but that's not shocking.
Should we bring in Kobe?
Yeah, let's bring him
Kobe. Let's get him out of the gate here. Braydon Coburn joining us here. And Kobe, how are you, bud? How you been? You had some surgery, right? You're on mute.
Yeah, Kobe's on mute.
Can we unmute Kobe?
How's that?
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, I got the postseason. The Lightning didn't have anybody on the surgery docket, so I decided to put that for them.
Those days are supposed to be behind you now that you're not playing the end of season surgery.
Now, these are the just getting old ones, I think. So
Yeah.
So Kobe, I want to ask you something we heard during exit interviews last Wednesday. It was an interesting comment from Julian. We heard it from a number of the players as well. Kind of the idea that to have success in the playoffs, you need to be able to come up with big plays. We know a big play when we see it, but unlike something where you might say, well, our penalty kill needs to get better, so you work on your penalty kill, or your power play needs to get better, or we need to defend better, like there are structural things you can do. The big play is kind of like off in the Netherlands, and when it happens it's great, but it's hard to kind of affect big plays, at least from my perspective. And I'm thinking back, like, let's take 2015. You were on that team. Your goal in Game 7 broke a 0-0 tie. That was a big play. I think of Tyler Johnson's buzzer beater against Montreal, big play. What does it take to kind of find those big plays and help your team have success in a playoff series?
Well, guys, the way I look at it, it's the big plays are going to happen whether you're on the good side of it or the bad side of it. But the real key for me is the doing the little things really well. You mentioned that Game 7. Well, that was a result of doing a lot of little things right on the cycle. When they do that, you get a chance to make a big play. So for me, I would fight back against that notion of like looking for that big play. Like, how do you train for that? How do you prepare for that? And I think it's really a combination of doing a lot of little things really well. And then those big plays, they will go your way more often than not. And, not to say, you watch the playoffs now and you watch a game-winning goal that goes off a Zamboni door. Is that a big play? Like, how do you train for that? Last night in that game against Montreal and Buffalo. So, but I think if you want to affect the outcome of the game, you have to get really proficient, really good at just doing little things better than the other team.
With that being said, the Lightning probably felt they did a lot of good things, Kobe, in that first round matchup with Montreal. Where do you think they came up a bit short? Maybe something we didn't think was going to happen. Maybe it was a save here and there. Maybe it was a face-off, which had plagued them all year long. Was there something you felt like in that series? Yep, this is where being a little deficient showed up just enough to not come out victorious.
Well, I think it's the risk you run. And you saw Coop after a couple of those losses say, hey, we didn't have our best stuff tonight. And in playoffs, you just don't have that luxury because the margin of error gets smaller and smaller. We obviously know the parity of this league is so intense, but you have to put yourself those little games when you get to a Game 7 and you've maybe let some go through your fingers, and it's whether you can say, oh, it was a save here or maybe a play there. I don't really necessarily buy that notion. You should have created enough during that 7-game series to ever get to that Game 7. there's, when you get to a game 7, now you're rolling the dice. You could get a hot goalie, you could get some weird bounces, you could get some unfortunate officiating or a high stick that leads to a 4-minute major or a minor or a double minor. You're really rolling the dice. But the beauty of the 7-game series is that if you're the better team and you are on your game, and a game falls, here or there, but you still brought your best game. I think that, that it's really indicative of what the best teams, what the championship teams do. They're able to weather and buffer those little things, whether it's just a big play here or there. They're able to kind of find their way through those things. So for me, it's tough. I think we're all going to be, kind of sucking that lemon of that, what that game 7 was. But, you got to remember there's 6 games before that where, necessarily there was a couple of games where, you just can't have games where you're not at your best.
One other adage that we hear, Kobe, is, a really high level defensive effort can shut down skilled players on the other side. And we saw that in the series. I mean, the skilled players, for the most part, didn't do as much as maybe they would have liked. Having said that, at the end of the series, we heard, from the Lightning top guys, we heard from Vasilevsky too, who said it about the top scorers, like, we needed to score more, we needed to generate more. How could they have generated more, understanding the Canadians were bringing a very high-level defensive effort? They blocked a lot of shots. They got in the lanes. They prevented second-chance opportunities. Was there more that the Lightning could have done to generate more offense?
Well, I know you guys watch a lot of hockey. I've been I've been laid up a little bit here, so I've been watching more hockey than I care to admit, whether it's watching under 17s and now the World Championship starting and all the West Coast games. And, sometimes I'm going to sleep being like, man, maybe I can get another game in somewhere here or there. The NHL Network's awesome. I got to watch a little bit of one of our top prospects and Sam O'Reilly playing with Kitchener. And, and you start to see trends, especially in playoffs, whether it's whatever league it is, it gets tighter and tighter. And skill guys are extremely important, and skilled guys, they're that skilled for a reason, because they know and they can adapt, and they're very smart in figuring out how to cultivate offense. But when I watch now, it's the goals that are scored in the inside and the goals that are created from confusion and traffic and having people at the net. And so if I would say, if there was anything that I could look back on this Lightning Canadian series and say that was a little bit missing, was just that presence in front of the net, that omnipresence of like somebody being there all the time, and not just kind of flying in and out and not flash screens, but having that player that's kind of just having the collective mindset of like, we need somebody around the net, and we're just going to put pucks there. And then we're going to out-battle, we're going to out-will, and we're going to roll the dice and see if maybe some of those chances we get a chance to get a stick on, or it goes off a shin pad of someone else. And I find that once you kind of are able to get that part of your game going and you're able to kind of control that part of the net, then some of the other stuff, some of the other seams start opening up. Some of the things from the top, being able to spread the defensive zone coverages out a little bit more, start to open up. But from my standpoint of seeing how goals are being scored in extremely tight checking playoff games, it's that presence in front of the net that was just a little bit lacking for me for the Lightning against the Montreal Canadiens.
We actually took some callers and some questions from people who had mentioned that, particularly on the power play. They felt like maybe that was something that could have been a bit better on the Lightning side. Kobe, I wanted to ask you that because I feel like when we talk about the Lightning, on this show, and I hear other people talk about it, especially the last 4 years being bounced in the first round, all of them have been competitive for sure. But I think we all felt confident in the Lightning because there were a couple of things working in their favor. One, they had the advantage in net. Vasilevsky, Hall of Famer, you know him, tremendous. Also, they have all this experience of guys who have won cups and guys who have performed in big moments. But when you exit in the first round for 4 straight years, is that not as big of a deal, maybe, as we make it out to be, knowing that there's a ton of parity in today's game and that every team is evenly matched for the most part? Or do you feel like those are still things in the Lightning's favor that they can lean into year in and year out, specifically in the playoffs?
Greg, I think the biggest frustration maybe from a lot of fans' perspective is, when you're in this sports kind of halo, and this, I feel like we're still in these golden years of what this group is, and you just feel a profound disappointment. Like, there's a chance that slipped through our fingers. And then when that chance keeps slipping through your fingers, and the nucleus, and the guys and the caliber of this team, and there's no doubt in my mind that the group that was here, whether it was different things happening, it definitely could have gone the other way, and this team could be competing for a Stanley Cup. But the matter of the fact is they aren't. And there's always a reflection period. I know that last year at this time, Julian said, hey, we got to get harder to play against. And this team was a team that was definitely harder to play against all season long. But it just goes to show you, like, there's more to it than that. You have to be able to score and find different ways, and have your depth contribute in different ways, and have your defense do something that's, just whether it's an absolute shutdown clinic, or pressuring people, or where the dangerous shots are coming from are high percentage saves, or your power play gets hot at the right time. Or we look at like the Edmonton Oilers a couple of years ago when they go on a run of 35, 36 straight penalty kills. Little things like that. Having that a component of your game turn to another level is absolutely huge.
One thing Julian said after this year, and he actually said the same thing after last year, and this is kind of related to what changes he may look to make, which he said 2 years ago, he really wanted to address team defense, 5-on-5 play, traded for McDonough, traded for Moser, signed Gensel. It's been quieter since. He said the Lightning have had two of the best regular seasons during their 13-year run of being an elite team, and the metrics bear that out. They've been basically a top 5 team, offense, defense, 5-on-5, power play, penalty kill. The last 2 years, power play was a little lower this year, but it was good in the second half. So where do you come down on this? Like, do you think that having outstanding regular seasons where you are doing all the things that you think you need to do well to not only make the playoffs but have success in the playoffs are there still? Or kind of what Greg was talking about, it's a results-based business. The regular season's kind of be damned. Here we are out in the first round again. Do you think that there's a need to kind of rethink how the team is constructed moving into next year?
Well, I think you don't want to be in a spot where you're just reacting. Hey, we got beat by Montreal, so now we have to build a team that can beat Montreal. Because I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. There may be things about your game that you're considering and saying, hey, maybe this is an area where when come playoff time that we can do better and we can have that kind of thing. But ultimately, you're trying to build a team that is going to get you back into that opportunity to get into the playoffs. Team construction wise, I think as a general manager, if you polled every single general manager, they're going to do whatever they can to make their team better through the offseason. And I think that it's really hard for teams in this salary cap era just to kind of just roll it back. You're going to have to make adjustments. You're going to have to create internal competition of guys coming in and making those pushes, whether it's a third line guy or a young guy pushing for a second line position or whatever it is, or an unsigned free agent that jumps into your top 6 and pushes another guy out. There's going to be things like that are going to be necessary for the team to really work. But, you look at the Eastern Conference and the trends that are going on, and you figure out, okay, what metrics were important. It was one of the things that was important, defensive zone, like goals against, getting that down to a level that is in the league's best. Absolutely. And then you could look at it and say, like, well, our goals against average down enough against the teams that are important to have it down against. There's one thing to play against the weakest teams and shut them out, and maybe that artificially changes your metrics a little bit. So I think you want to make sure you're building your team to play your best hockey against the other best teams in the Eastern Conference on a regular basis. And much like what I think Kucherov talked about as the power play being the best against the best teams. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a tough nut to crack, and it's one you're just trying to build your team at the right time, and you're praying that your team's going to be healthy and come playoff time when it matters the most, and that you're going to get guys like an Alex Newhook who's going to put in through the first 2 rounds, put in 6-7 goals. And kind of be like, where did that come from, right? So
they found a lot of depth on the back end, Kobe, this year. I think that was a very positive sign. They also found Dominic James. It felt like Gage Gonsalves took some steps. So there were some really good stories for the Lightning this year. When you take a look at the back end, how excited are you for next year? Hopefully a Victor Hedman ready to go as well, which is, look, you don't play a series without your Hall of Fame defenseman. That's a big deal. And specifically to Darren Radish, who knows what's going to happen, but from where you sit, what do you think made him so impactful finally this year? And do you think, because we've heard some of this, did he take advantage of the situation, or do you think he also was a product of the Lightning system and having those opportunities finally to showcase after he was in the lineup on a consistent basis? How do you evaluate Radish and what we saw? Was that the real Darren Radish, or is there some sort of combination of both, right place, right time, contract year, and all of these things play into it?
Well, you got a lot there, Greg. And it was a good question, and I think I'll start with just the D as a whole of what I'm excited about at the D as a whole, because I think there's a lot of bright spots there. A guy like Dastu. The fact that he had the impact he did in his first year in the league, and I expect him over the next coming couple seasons, he's only going to get better. That offensive capability, that offensive instinct of his is only going to grow. And then I look to a guy like Emil Littleberg, who's his trajectory as a defenseman, as a guy that's a physical guy, a guy that's extremely hard to play against, a guy that's making more decisions in the right direction more often. As he's gotten more experience, and and Max Crozier as another guy, and Declan Carlisle. These are guys that I'm extremely excited about, because I think their best hockey is to come. And unfortunately for those guys this year, there was some unfortunate injuries. Crozier, seemed like he was a guy that was just kind of, every time he got going, he got thrown on the shelf. Emil Littleberg, another guy, he gets that tough ankle injury and then gets hit with the puck in the face. And it's just like nothing seemed to go in that guy's right direction. And sometimes when things like that happen one year, the next year you'll play 82 games or 84 games next year. So those guys I'm extremely excited about, because I think the ceiling and the amount of growth that we can see from this season is going to be immense. And when I look at their package and their overall skill set of what those guys bring to the Tampa Bay Lightning, there's a lot there. We know what Victor Hedman and McDonough and Chernak, we know what those guys are going to bring to the table. They've shown an amazing amount of consistency of excellent play in this league. And those guys are going to be that extra 0.5% or extra 2% or whatever, however you want to quantify it on the back end. And then a guy like Darren Radish, I think, everyone's like, oh my God, I'm so surprised he scored, 20 plus goals this season. Well, you were kind of waiting for this to happen for me, honestly. You could see he always has had that offensive instincts and his ability to put the puck in the net. And I think this year, you have to have that skill set to be featured. Is he a byproduct of the system? Absolutely. But everybody is. Kucherov's a byproduct of the system. Point's a byproduct. Hagel, they're all byproducts of what the overall team game is doing. What's different about Darren Radish is he was able to be featured. He was able to be a guy, a first option, a second option on the power play, a guy that, when he gets that confidence, he feels more comfortable shooting for that corner or shooting through traffic, or being able to have that confidence of, I'm just going to load it up and get it on net. because Darren Radish didn't magically get to shoot harder over the summertime. He's had that for the last couple of years. It's been a thing where his game has grown, and his ability to see the plays and put himself in spots to make the play and then really be featured in the system is huge. I think the part about Darren Radish that outside of the offensive side of the game this year was really, that the chemistry he built with JJ Moser. Those guys on a very regular basis, they were our best pairing. Those were guys that were playing tough minutes. They were moving the puck extremely well. The way they broke out of their zone, they just seemed to have a really good feel for the way that the forwards are going to play, and then being able to support them. And I thought that, as a whole, that defense core was one of the very, very bright spots for this team this year, and one that I think has continued to get better. And where does Darren Radish go from here? I'm not sure as far as what his agent is going to be wanting on the market, and what other teams and what that value in that market's going to look like. We know that this free agent pool is, it's a little. There's not a lot out there. There's just with the abundance of the salary cap going up, and then Darren Radish having a career year, it's hard to blame a player for wanting to test exactly to see what his market value is going to be as a defenseman that scored 21 goals.
Last one for me, Kobe. You mentioned Sam O'Reilly. I mean, we have heard Julian talk about this guy. The Lightning are thrilled that they have this guy in their system. You've watched him play in the playoffs. He was the OHL Player of the Year. He's killing it in the playoffs. I think he's got 15 goals. He's winning the vast majority of his faceoffs. He's on a great team. When you watch him, can you envision what he is doing well at the junior hockey level and see how that may translate to the pro game and maybe to the NHL game?
Well, I have to admit, there's a player that wore that Kitchener Rangers jersey that every time I'm watching Sam, I keep thinking, is this Mike Richards? I played with Mike in Philadelphia, and he was a guy that he blew me away at just his compete level. He just had this ability to do little things right all the time. It seemed like the vast majority of every battle, it seemed like they flipped Mike Richards' way at having this competitive edge. You could tell he was just a leader. Even on this Kitchener team that is very good, no doubt about it. But he just puts himself on the forefront of this, and then you look at the fact that the guy's he looks like he's, in all intents and purposes, he's a winner. And how do you find that? Is that a special quality certain guys have? I think sometimes it is, and it's not a coincidence that Sam O'Reilly's building the resume he's had through his junior career, that this guy, he knows what it takes to win in playoffs, which is a mental skill in itself. But he's an impressive player to me, and one that I'm just kind of, every time I'm watching one of their games, I'm reminiscing about, could this be a Mike Richards that shows up? Because Mike Richards was a guy that stepped out of the OHL. He stepped right into the American League during the lockout. And then what did he do? He won a Calder Cup with the Philadelphia Phantoms. And then, steps into us in Philadelphia, becomes a young captain. And unfortunately, I think for our team, he ends up in LA where, what does he do? He wins a couple Stanley Cups and Olympic gold medals. But the thing about Mike Richards was he didn't do anything that was necessarily extremely flashy. And I think Sam's game maybe reflects that in a certain thing. He gets it done, but it's not a flashy thing, but he's a winner through and through. And I really hope, and I think that we do have one of those guys that you're looking back in 10, 15 years and you're like, what a marvelous trade we made with the Edmonton Oilers to get this guy on board.
Kobe, we appreciate the hockey talk. Continue to feel better and watch a lot of hockey.
I don't know if it's in my DNA not to watch. But thank you guys, and thanks for everything throughout the season. And I always enjoy coming on here and jumping in the car and listening to you guys whenever I can.
Thanks, Kobe.
Thanks, Kobe. Appreciate you. Braydon Coburn joining us. Always love Kobe's perspective and very honest, I think, in his assessment of how things are playing out and how he sees them.
I have a feeling he stayed up to the end of the Vegas Anaheim overtime game last night, and I guess it's good for us that it ended early in overtime, because if that had been like 4 overtimes, he may have been sleeping in this morning. Who knows?
Yeah, it's a good point. It's a good point by you. Questions are starting to trickle in here.
Yeah.
I don't know if we want to get to these first part.
Well,
if there's anything you want to get into?
So what he talked about was a little bit of what Julian talked about. Julian had them in 2 separate categories, where he said these are the 2 things that he felt Montreal did better than the Lightning.
Yeah.
One was score timely goals, which we can call big goals.
Yeah.
And the other was score on shots through screens, tips, traffic. What did Kobe talk about when I asked, like, how do you find a big play? And he's like, it's not some like magic formula that you can't, conjure up. He's like, it's doing the little things. But he talked about, he actually talked about this in relation to scoring more. But I mean, had the Lightning scored more, we would have been talking more about big plays they made. Mm-hmm. He's like, more traffic, more chaos. When a team is D'ing you up, you need to create confusion around the net. And it's not like Montreal did it. I mean, I think the numbers were 5-3 in the series. Julian talked about the Canadiens scored 5 goals on screen shots, tip shots, traffic shots. Lightning scored 3. So again, it wasn't 11-2. 5-3 is fairly close, but 5 in a series where, what did the Canadiens score? 15 goals, 16 goals. If a third of them are coming off screens and tips, like, that's a fairly significant amount. And that was what Kobe said he took out of that series, which was the more greasy goals might have been needed, and that might have helped the Lightning come up with some big goals at key times, which is something that our fans have certainly talked about. Their passing, and Phil has talked about, they're passing out of shot attempts. So it may not be as necessary in the regular season, where you are having more time and space to make plays. You're not seeing the same team that's focused on shutting you down 7 times over a 2-week span. So that was interesting, because Kobe kind of echoed what Julian was talking about. And we'll see if we see more of a meat and potatoes approach at points next year.
And you wonder too, so like a guy like Nick Paul, you feel like could fill that void a little bit bigger body. He's got good hands, and it was just, a tough year for him staying healthy and finding consistency. I think they have guys who can do it, but maybe that's something they try to target in the off season if they feel like they need to have more of a net front presence. And to your point, I'm not sure it's about necessarily the regular season, but it's having guys.
And I don't even know that it's personnel, Gray. I think it's an attitude, it's a mentality of going there and saying, this is where we're going to go to score goals.
Could be.
Now, having said all of that, they lost the series. They got outscored by 1 goal in the series. Right. Like, again, what we talked about, this is a very close series. They could have won the series.
Yeah.
And as Julian said, history is written by the winners. Mm-hmm. So in some, version where the Lightning win the 4th game, maybe, as the fan said, they got what they deserved in Game 7, which they deserved better than a 2-1 loss where they, held the Canadiens to 9 shots. Then we would be talking about, look at the job the Lightning did against the Suzuki line, and their top players, Brandon Hagel, 6 goals. Gensel had 8 points. Kucherov didn't score a lot in terms of goals, but he had some key assists, and he scored a huge goal in Game 2. And, we would be talking about things differently based on who won Game 7. Nobody on the Montreal side is talking about, where was the Suzuki line 5-on-5? Nobody is talking about that, right? Even as they have continued not really to score a lot 5-on-5 in the second round series. Right, because history is written by the winners. Exactly. So, but the Lightning didn't win. So here we are, talking about the things that didn't go their way that might have tipped the balance, but didn't. So it comes with the territory.
Probably one of the best sayings we can use on this show. I think the history is going to be defined by the winners. I mean, that is very true. I want to get to this email from Jim, our good friend in Jacksonville.
Sure.
He's been sending this a couple of days ago. He said, here are 3 areas I would like to see improve for next season. Face-off percentage, which also included improving 50-50s. Reduce bench minor penalties. Too many men, especially having players showing more of a sense of urgency to get to the bench at the end of their shift. Is that Phil mentioning that one.
Who wrote this email?
Who wrote this one? And a better record versus the Eastern Conference. The Lightning are the only team that made the playoffs that had 20 regulation losses versus teams in their conference. Your thoughts?
All right, so the first two, those do sound like Phil. Because Phil talks about
Hey, Phil, just come on the show. No, I'm joking.
Yes, Phil gets annoyed with the 50-50s that they don't win enough, and Phil gets annoyed with how slowly sometimes the players go to the bench. I don't remember, Jim, that they had that many bench minors. I mean, they had some. I seem to remember a couple of years ago they had more. Now, they had one in the playoffs, but so did the Canadians. Each team had one bench minor for too many men on the ice. It's more about getting to the bench quickly so your replacements can get on the ice. So you're not getting stung on a counter. And look, Phil talks about it. That's a fair point. Faceoffs were a problem this year.
Yeah.
I will just point out two of the teams that are also bad on faceoffs are still playing. Minnesota and Buffalo. Now, I'm not
Faceoffs
saying,
be damned.
like they're winning, like they both won a first-round series despite not doing well in the faceoff circle, and the Sabres acquired Sam Carrick to help them, and he's been injured in the playoffs, so they haven't had him. Now, I do believe they nudged the Canadians in the faceoff circle in last night's game, but for the series, they have lost more than they won. So as we talked about during the regular season, you can win with a subpar faceoff percentage, but it certainly helps if you have good face-off guys or some one or two that you can really lean on at key points. And yes, I mean, it would help the Lightning to get that. The point about the Eastern Conference, so look, the Lightning are one of 5 teams to win 50 games. Period. So does it matter where those wins came against? Like you're going to say, well, the Western Conference was weaker. Well, the Lightning went 1-1 against Colorado. They went 1-1 against Minnesota. They went 2-0 against Dallas. They went 2-0 against Vegas. Anaheim's still playing. They went 2-0 against Anaheim. I mean, these are teams that are playing in the playoffs right now, and the Lightning did pretty well against them. So, I mean, I don't know. I think you get your wins where you get your wins. The fact that they didn't win as many against the East relative to other playoff teams, does that matter in the series against Montreal? Is that why they lost the series? I'm not sure that really matters. And there is something to be said about winning against the West where you're traveling, longer road trips.
That's true.
The Lightning were able to take care of business. They had a good road record this year. That helped them a lot.
Frosty says, need Sam O'Reilly to be the guy next year.
Well, Julian is going into next year not expecting Sam O'Reilly to be the guy, but he is willing to be surprised. Not even surprised. I think he feels Sam O'Reilly is going to be on the team sooner rather than later. But he's not entering the beginning of next season with the expectation that O'Reilly is going to be taking a spot. Now, as we learned with some other guys like Destu and James, even though they didn't start the year on the NHL roster, they came up soon after. It doesn't take much to tip that balance, particularly if you have a good camp. We'll see how he does next year. What Julian talked about was adjusting to the size and the strength and the pace. But the knowing how to play part, adapting your game to the pro style game from the amateur level, it sounds like O'Reilly is there. And that's usually the biggest learning curve for players who are making that jump.
This question comes from Bill. I hate to say it, but I think Point and Radish will be gone.
Well, Point is under contract, so then you're saying they're trading Braydon Point. I would be surprised if that's the case. You know, Radish, Kobe is right. There's not a huge number of free agents out there. He's probably, I say probably, the marquee offensive defenseman. Maybe more than probably. Now, I will say, Erasmus Anderson, who's a right-handed defenseman, who's a very good player, is a pending UFA. He's still playing right now with Vegas. And look, John Carlson is still doing quite well. Now, I'm not saying that John Carlson would get the same money or term as Darren Radish, but those are two other right-handed defensemen that I just mentioned that are pending UFAs. There may be others that I'm not thinking of right now. And some of those players may be gobbled up by the teams that they're with. They may re-sign with those teams before July 1. You felt, hearing Radish talk at the exit interview, though, that you felt he's I'm going to certainly test the market. And
Yeah, I think
see
that's
what's
fair.
out there.
I mean, and listen, that might be the smart play for him personally. I mean, come
Right.
on. How old is he? You know, this may be the one
Yeah,
big
30.
contract he gets. Yeah, I mean, come on. So, yeah, it'd be probably dumb not to. Mytho says, I'm very curious your guys' thoughts on Points Paul and Geeky. Maybe Bjork. For Matthews, if he does get moved. I think, obviously, Matthews would be instantly valuable as an elite faceoff winner, too.
So Matthews, look, the cap is going up. The Lightning do have room. Acquiring Matthews would require sending players back to Toronto, and so you'd be freeing up money as well. So maybe the money could work. I remain skeptical that Austin Matthews is getting traded. Like, I mean, unless he's basically going to the Leafs and saying, trade me. If you're Toronto, why would you trade Austin Matthews? He's one of the best players in the world. You know, the lure of, ooh, look what we can get back. You know, unless you're getting an Austin Matthews type player back, it's kind of a hard argument to make. Now, if Matthews goes to them and says, I demand a trade, I mean, the player only has so much leverage, right? Is he going to sit out?
That's
I don't know. I guess I know you brought that up last week about Chris Johnson. He's like, Matthews might be gone. And like, I'll believe it when I see it. Would the Lightning love to add an Austin Matthews or Connor McDavid? We had that discussion last year, I think. Yeah, of course. If you have a chance to add one of the best players in the world, you do it. I'm not disputing that. I'll believe it when I see it.
so
He had more in there about like Point
answer his
Paul
question,
and Bjorkstrand.
To answer his question, you know my philosophy. I think you get the best player back in a deal, you win the trade.
Yes.
I think Austin Matthews is a top 5 player in this league. You know, you can disagree with that. Maybe you don't, Mish. I know you're high on him.
No, I agree.
I would bring that guy back. I'd say, hey, where do you want to play? I think Toronto is also a challenging place to play. And look, his buddy's not there anymore, Marner. He's gone. He's
all
a
this
terrific
chatter
player.
all this chatter about how Mitch Marner can't perform in the playoffs.
Well, he's a great
He has
player.
been so good in the playoffs.
He's
this
a great
year.
player. Yeah, that's.
I mean, he
crazy.
had a
But-
natural hat trick and 4 points in an earlier game for Vegas against Anaheim. And I don't know if you watched the game. I watched the first period last night. So I've always believed this about Marner. He's one of the smartest players without the puck in the NHL, particularly defensively. He can anticipate where the puck is going to go and intercept. And Anaheim had a 5-minute major. They scored on it. They scored 1. So they scored in the first period to go up 1-0. They didn't score on the rest of it. So the penalty ends.
Yeah.
And Anaheim has the puck in the offensive zone, and there is a little bit of an errant pass, and Marner's there. He's like on it, and he explodes up the ice. He gets basically a partial breakaway, draws a penalty. Goalie made the save, draws a penalty. Vegas scores on the ensuing power play to tie the game at 1. They never trailed again. Like, we've seen this from Marner through the playoffs. This is ridiculous in retrospect that he was run out of Toronto, Greg. Now, maybe things unfolded differently, and he has to own some of the disappointment, I guess, that if he didn't play to his level in some of these playoff series, but it wasn't one guy. And I am sorry, from what I have heard, he took the brunt of the criticism that was levied on the Leafs for them not going, let's just say, past the second round. They won a first-round series twice. So, look, that's maybe what's affecting Matthews, too. He's just like, this place is not,
Why would you want to play
kumbaya
there?
for me.
Why would you want to
But-
play there? That would be the question.
And maybe Marner would have left anyway. But
Yeah.
they certainly didn't make it, welcoming for him to be like, yeah, I absolutely want to come back here. So he goes to Vegas. He gets to play with some really good players. And he's killing it. And he did very, very well, by the way, for Team Canada in the 2 tournaments this past couple of years. 4 nations last year,
Same
and
guy.
Olympics this year. Same
Same
guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think Mark Stone even was like, I don't understand, because Stone played with him, in Team Canada. Stone's like, I don't get it. Like, this guy is one of the best players in the league, and he produces at, critical points, and he's doing it for Vegas right now. Anyway, you were talking about Matthews. The fan asked about some of the Lightning players. We've touched on them. You and I are in agreement. The Lightning would love to get rebound years, if we want to call it that, from Braydon Point, from Nick Paul, from Victor Hedman. It's a little bit different, mental health component, whereas Point and Paul also, in addition to Hedman, had physical limitations because they had injuries that I think affected their ability to play to the level that we're accustomed to. But yeah, that's going to be part of it next year.
This question comes from, can you get my seeing glasses on there, partner?
Balfazan?
So putting on your potential GM hats, I have 2 questions. All things staying relatively stable, how much are you willing to pay Radish, and do you bring Bjorkstrand back, and for how much?
Well, Bjorkstrand had a rough year. Now, having said that, I thought he had a good playoff. Is that something that they would consider, bringing him back for, to have him play with James and Gonsalves? If they do, it would be a lot less than whatever he made in his previous contract. 5.5, I think, was his previous contract. There is cap room, though. And I mean, the two may be a little bit related. If they can't re-sign Radish, then they have the money potentially that they would use to re-sign Radish available for someone else. Different positions, though. They may look to address trying to find an offensive defenseman if they can't re-sign Radish. Who knows? Maybe they put that on Victor's shoulders next year. Maybe they put it on Destu's shoulders next year. We'll see. The question was, how much do you pay Radish? You've talked pretty consistently. You say 6.
I'd say 6 mil. 6 mil. Now, there's some factors working in his favor because
open market probably would get him
market,
more than that.
Yeah, open market. Probably. The cap is going up.
Mm-hmm.
Kobe mentioned this, that maybe the free agent pool isn't as deep or as attractive maybe as in many years, so maybe that works in Radish's favor. I also think, too, internally, I think Radish would be a security blanket in a positive way to get that offense from the back end, assuming that Victor Hedman, you don't know what you're going to get next year.
Mm-hmm.
Destu may be that guy eventually, too, by the way. But
maybe.
You don't know. You don't know.
They may not be able to bring back Radish, though.
That's very true.
I mean, Radish may just say, I'm going to go to open market, and this other team is going to offer me more, and that's where I want to go.
It's very true.
Right.
But if Radish got $6 million a year for 4 or 5 years, I'm curious what the reaction would be from our audience.
Yeah, I think that they would. I think our audience would be on board. And I think
that's fair. Look, 21 goals is 21 goals. I mean, that's an incredible amount from the back end. Brian says, a hard question. It seems like every other team has figured out that to stop the Lightning in the playoffs, stop Cooch. Is there a way to mitigate this? Cooch is not a liability at all.
Well, when you hear Julian talk, I mean, they are going to start discussions to re-sign Kucherov and keep him with the Lightning for basically the remainder of his career. He's 33. So he'll be 34 when this contract that he's currently on ends. Kucherov expects more from himself. Some of that's on the power play in the playoffs I'm talking about. Some of that's on the power play. Some of that's 5-on-5. It'd be interesting to go back and look at the years where he was really, basically, I'm not sure he's ever had 2 points a game in the playoffs, but, more than a point a game, let's just say, and more goals. How is he scoring those goals? Are things tighter now? Does he need to make some adjustments in terms of scoring greasier goals, dirtier goals? I mean, he had some chances. He could have scored more than one. I think back to that Game 5, last couple of minutes, 6-on-5, and Kucherov was firing away, and he barely missed on some. And Dobish made some saves on him on some of the others. But look, it's the fact of the matter. He is their most talented offensive player. He's the most prolific scoring player the Lightning have year in, year out. And for them to have some success in the playoffs, he doesn't need to average, 130 points over 77 games or whatever it was. But, he's going to need to produce more than what he's been producing. And he said as much, when he met with the media at the end of the season. Other teams are going to play him hard.
Yeah.
So the fan is right. The game plan is limit Kucherov. That is right at the top of the list defensively. So the onus kind of falls to him to be like, all right, how am I going to combat this?
Look, I think he would agree. He needed to be better. I mean, you have your best players for a reason. Those guys are supposed to be the performers when things get tight. And I'm including the Braydon points, the Hagels, the Kucherovs, the Gensels, throw in Cirelli. I think those are all fair. And would you like all of them to be clicking on all cylinders? For sure. It doesn't have to be, but I think you need your best offensive player to be your best player in those moments. Sometimes he was, and sometimes I think admittedly he wasn't. And that's just where we are. Dustin says, I thought Perry was supposed to be the net front presence, the dirty areas, but he wasn't all series.
So some of that was he was on power play 2, and the Lightning didn't use power play 2 a lot. And then when he wasn't on the power play, he was kind of on the end of the series he was playing with Point and Gensel. But most of the series he was on the fourth line, and the fourth line, whatever the fourth line looked like, he was on that line, whether it was with Paul and Sabourin or whoever, right? Sometimes Gergensons and Sabourin. Geeky was on the fourth line with Perry at the beginning of the series. They just didn't get a lot of ice time.
Yeah.
I think that was probably the biggest reason why we didn't see him in front of the net, is because we didn't see him on the ice very much. He did almost score in Game 6. I mean, if Danault doesn't pull that one off the line, that's a goal for Perry. But
that's true.
I mean, one almost goal doesn't, do it, honestly. But I think some of it was circumstance about where he was in the lineup and how much power play time we saw, particularly early in the series.
Michael says, if the same thing happens next year, do we revamp? And if yes, what's the difference between going ahead and doing it now?
So part of this revamping is the only way to revamp is to make trades. Because the Lightning don't have a lot of players on expiring contracts. We mentioned a couple of them, like Radish and Bjorkstrand and Perry. Carlisle is a Group 6, which I'm not quite sure exactly what the Lightning are going to do with that, but he does have the opportunity as a free agent to go to another team if that's what he chooses. But the vast majority of the players the Lightning had on last year's team are under contract for this year's team. So you have kind of brought up the suggestion of maybe you make a trade to rattle things a little bit. And maybe that's what the fan is getting at. But it has to be the right trade. And Julian's not one to make a trade just to make a trade. So I keep going back to this again. It is a results-based business. Going out 4 years in a row in the first round doesn't sit well with the fans, doesn't sit well with the organization, doesn't sit well with the players, doesn't sit well with anyone. Yeah. So it happens a fifth straight year if they can get into the playoffs. Maybe things are a little different, and you're like, okay, we need to do more to change things up. As things stand right now, though, they're coming off a very, very successful regular season, which is not minimized by the GM. It's not. He's like, how do I build my team? First of all, you got to get in the playoffs, right? So you build a team that can get you in the playoffs, and what the Lightning did during the regular season usually translates to playoff success. The area that didn't translate to playoff success this year was lack of offense. But they defended well. They did a good job 5-on-5. Their penalty kill hurt them in game 1, but did a great job in the other 6 games. Their power play didn't kill it, but it did enough, right? It helped them in a couple of the games that they won, notably game 4, where they got a key power play goal to tie that game and then ended up winning it 3-2. So I don't know. I mean, I think my feeling is we're probably going to see much of the same team back next year, and Julian likes that. What we are going to see, hopefully, is growth from some younger players and maybe some new players that are turning pro. We mentioned O'Reilly.
Yeah.
Just because Sam O'Reilly, Julian is like, we have to see where he is. He may not start the season in the NHL, but does that matter, right? Like, if he's with the Lightning by the middle of the season or the end of the season, a chance to make a huge impact, right? So some of this is just going to come along like naturally through the flow of.
So practically speaking, it's hard to revamp your whole roster. It just is. The salary cap, things are harder to move around, in my opinion. I will say this, though. I think when you do get bounced in 4 straight rounds, I think as a GM, you have to go in, and while you can like your regular season all you want, you've got to know that the postseason is drastically different than the regular season. And just because you were really good in the regular season doesn't always translate to how you're going to play in the postseason. In fact, it's probably you have to go into that knowing, okay, whatever I did in the regular season, drop those metrics down by a half percentage point. We're not going to score as much as we did in the postseason
fair.
as we did in the regular season.
Yeah.
Our save percentage, maybe that goes up a little bit more, but maybe it doesn't if it's harder to get shots through. The other thing I would take a look at would be just, again, player performance. You have a dominant player in the regular season. In the postseason, that's probably going to come down a little bit. So I would be curious, while we consider and say we liked the Lightning's regular season, what does that mean when it's time to evaluate the postseason? Because you and I have talked about this ad nauseum over and over again, that there's not another sport where the play is different from the postseason to the regular season than in hockey. So how do you evaluate that as a GM? I think you have to be open-minded and say, okay, what part of the regular season did you really like? Because I could have sat there and said, boy, Dave, if they had that part of the regular season where they were 21-1 and they were going to do that in the postseason, I want that one. But if they were going to be the one coming out of the break, I'm not so sure. Now, they played better than that in the postseason.
They did.
And
a regular season is going to have ebbs and flows.
Correct, which is why I don't know if I would look at the regular season as a precursor to a degree of how well we're going to do in the postseason. I've watched too much hockey to not put a lot of stock in the regular season. And now we've got 84 games, by the way.
You make a good point. You do. But I will just point out, that I've said before, I'm not the GM, you're not the GM. The fans who write into the show are not the GM. The GM is the one that...
But I don't want to be a GM.
And look, to that point, I have talked until I'm blue in the face about how important penalty killing is to success in the playoffs, and I was just curious, so I took a look here. Here are the top 8 penalty kill teams in the playoffs so far. Number 1, Boston Bruins, out. Number 2, Carolina. We can talk about Carolina. They look great. Number 3, LA Kings, they're out. Number 4, Pittsburgh Penguins, they're out. Number 5, Vegas, they're in. 6, Ottawa, out. 7, Philadelphia, out. 8, Dallas, out. So how many teams are left? We have 7. Is that right? Because Carolina's through.
Yeah.
So of the 7 teams that are still playing, the top half of the penalty kill metric in the playoffs, only 2 are in the top half. So the teams that have struggled on penalty kill have been able to persevere to this point.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say struggled on penalty kill. There's one team that has really, really struggled on penalty kill, and that is Minnesota. And they got through the first round because they absolutely dominated Dallas 5-on-5.
Yeah.
They're running into some problems, though, in the second round because their penalty kill is really hurting them against Colorado. So, that's one of those regular season things where you're like, you want to have a good penalty kill. You want to make sure that your PK helps you out in the playoff series. This year is kind of turning that on its ear a little bit. So look, part of it is Julian might say, maybe we do need to change some things. Maybe I don't want to look exclusively, and not that he's doing this, but exclusively at the regular season. But to your point, like, it's hard to do a rehaul. I don't think the Lightning really want to do a rehaul. I think they like their team.
Yeah, I would.
I think it's on the. I mean, honestly, I think it's on the edges. I think that they were so close to winning the series. If they played those 7 games again, they could have won the series. As Julian said last week, a bounce here, a bounce there.
Yeah,
with nothing else changing, they could have won the series. What could they do to affect a change? I'm not sure that it's personnel. It may just be like attitude of willingness to get to dirty areas. And maybe that'll be a point of emphasis next year.
And maybe you bring in a guy who does that very well as well, strategically.
Well, that was what the fan was asking about Perry.
Yeah, strategically.
Right?
So, I mean, you don't have to do a lot of it. I mean, obviously they felt they needed something like that, or else they wouldn't have acquired a Corey Perry.
And everything that he brings in terms of, presence on the bench and veteran leadership and all
Can
that.
you find that guy in free agency? I'm sure you could. I mean, there's some
if
guys
it's
performing.
A depth forward, sure.
Yeah, Mythos said Vasi looked ticked off in his exit interview.
Yes, he did.
He's tired of the BS. And Dio Hippo said, I think Vasi was throwing down the gauntlet for Point and Cooch. So getting
if he's saying it to the media,
going.
he's probably saying it to their faces, too. He and Kucherov are best friends, so I'm sure that they've had a discussion about it. He was upset.
Kyle says,
he's also annoyed that he's like gets no, as he said, no goal support in Game 7s. He's like, it's my 6th Game 7 every year. It's, 1 goal. I get 1 goal every Game 7. Well, some of the Game 7s, they win 1-0, right? But that's, the other team is only getting 1 goal, sometimes 2 or 2. In our last couple of minutes, I at least want to touch on what we've seen elsewhere.
Yeah, do it, please.
Just general thoughts. The Carolina Hurricanes, if this isn't their year, I don't know what year is going to be their year, at least to get to the Stanley Cup final. So I'm not saying that, they're going to get Buffalo or Montreal. That's going to be a tough series for them. Yeah. But they are rolling. They've won 8 in a row. They get a long break here. And, sometimes that long break isn't welcome, But because they play such a high tempo sort of game, they're going to get their batteries recharged. And they are playing at a higher level. As much as I liked how Montreal played against the Lightning, Carolina is playing better than any other team in the playoffs so far. Now, you brought up they got Ottawa and Philly. Fair enough. Like, you get who you get, right? They look like the team that they look like in the regular season, where they are just on puck possession. Puck to the net, puck to the net, puck to the net, retrieve, puck to the net, puck to the net. Like, yeah, the goalie can stop some of them, but some of them are going to go in. You see the winning goal that Jackson Blake scored? Like, Vladar kind of muffed it. It's hard to say he muffed it. It was a good shot. It was off the rush. It was a 3-on-2. But how many other saves did Vladar have to make, right? They're just relentless, and they're going to still be relentless, and they're going to be, I will say, big favorites against whoever they get, Montreal or Buffalo. Now, if they get to the Stanley Cup final, let's just say they get Colorado, that may be a different kettle of fish. But they look great. The second thing I will say is what Montreal did to the Lightning was not a fluke. They are D'ing up Buffalo. Yeah. They are. Their penalty kill has hurt them, at least in the last game, last night. Buffalo scored 2 power play goals. But the Sabres do not look like the same team that dismantled the Bruins. I think they won Game 1 in part because they were ready and Montreal was coming off a Game 7 win. Right. That can happen sometimes. They had a little bit of a dip. Since then, the Canadians, I think, have outplayed the Sabres. And the Sabres penalty kill saved them last night because the Canadians went 1 for 7 on the power play. But, it was like role reversal. The Sabres blocked, I think the Canadians had 30 shots blocked last night. Right. So, to me, Montreal has actually outplayed Buffalo in that series. The Lightning were able to do more to disrupt the Canadians' offensive attack than the Sabres have. Now, it's a new series, like different teams, all of that. It's 2-2. Those teams are in the same spot that the Lightning and Canadians were at through 4 games, where the Canadians don't have home ice. They're 2-2. They lost Game 4 at home. Let's see how they do going on the road in Game 5. And then the last series I'll just mention that is very interesting is Minnesota and Colorado. We can get to the Vegas-Anaheim series. That'll be over by next week. But I like Colorado. Colorado, they've had harder. Their second-round opponent is one of the best teams in the NHL. And I do believe that they have outplayed Minnesota. They certainly outplayed them the 2 games in Denver. And if you watch the Game 4, at one point, Minnesota had 4 shots on net through 30 minutes or something. So Colorado looks like they've got their engine going. They have a tough opponent in the second round, and they're up 3-1. So if they win that series, they will be, like Carolina, a huge favorite against either Vegas or Anaheim. But they got to win a 4th one. And there is going back in history, Minnesota has rallied from a 3-1 deficit to beat Colorado years and years and years ago. I think it was Patrick Waugh's last season that they did that. Anyway.
It's nice to have that rest in the playoffs, too.
For Carolina.
Yeah, those short series.
Freddie Anderson's been great.
Yeah.
Their penalty kill, I mentioned number 2 behind Boston because Buffalo had a bad power play in the first round. I think Carolina's allowed 2 power play goals on 45 chances or something crazy like that.
That is nuts.
That is just, that's how they are holding the other team to basically 2 goals or less every single game. I'm actually looking up 40 kills. They've killed 38 of them. And they've actually scored a shorthanded goal. So, when they are short, they're only -1 in terms of, the goal differential.
Partner, this was good.
Yeah.
Hop back on, and we'll do it again next week as we continue to do shows throughout the Stanley Cup Final.
We'll keep the fans apprised of what day.
No doubt about it. And thank you to our audience for listening. We appreciate you guys. And thanks to Kobe.
Thanks to Kobe. Yes.
As well. Thanks for Steve Ersnick putting this on. Partner, I'll talk to you again next week.
Talk to you next
If
week.
not before. Thanks to Steve Ersnick as well. I am Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.